They were no longer as lively as before. They were truly old now. A year and a half had already passed since God's Domain's release, when Feng noticed how aged his parents were. The large amounts of debt, excessive laboring, and stress had caused both his parents to fall ill, gravely ill. Curing them required millions of credits, but during that time, Feng was merely a squad captain in shadow. The money he earned was far from enough to foot such expensive costs. Feng tried everything to collect enough money, yet it was still not enough. Even with trying his all, Feng's parents still left him a few months later. In his previous life, he failed to care for his parents properly. How could he have known of the pain and suffering? After Feng earned millions of credits, this pain remained within Feng's heart, for forevermore. Never would he have thought fate would play such a joke on him. He unexpectedly returned to the starting point, starting back up from zero. Great. This is just too great. Ha ha ha. Since I have been reincarnated, I have to change everything. I will earn enough money to cure mom and dad, and I will let them live a life without worries. Feng silently swore to himself as he wiped away the tears. Just when Feng was planning for his future, Blackie's call came ringing again, continuously urging Feng to go quickly to the university for the test. Yet Feng did not rush. He dressed at a relaxed pace, tidying himself up before heading to Jinhai University. He could not be more familiar with Shadow. Feng still remembered. It was while he was still attending university, Lan Hua Group's prize son, Lan Hailong, started up Shadow Workshop to enter God's domain. Lan Hailong also invested considerable funding into the recruitment of the student experts of Jinhai University. Feng participated in Shadow's examination at the time, successfully becoming a core member of the workshop, whereas Blackie became an outer member. Feng had been happy for quite some time after that incident. After 3 years of being under the leadership of Feng, Shadow Workshop allowed Lan Hua Group to greatly profit from God's domain, quickly becoming a large financial group. However, Feng would never have thought that Lan Hailong would be the one to fire him. Personally, since he had been reincarnated, he had an absolute advantage within God's domain that others did not. Naturally, he would not be joining Shadow to become a tool that profited others. He wanted to walk a different path, a path where he fought not for others, but for himself. He wanted to remove the need for his parents to send him living expenses. He wanted to pay back all the debt they had collected. To do that, he wanted to venture, to start his own workshop, to start his own company, and to build his own virtual kingdom. All to live a better life. As soon as Feng arrived at Teaching Block 1, he caught sight of a thin and tall figure in front of the building. The tanned youth was pacing around the hallway in a panic. This person was Blackie brother Feng. You finally decided to show up. Fortunately, registration hasn't closed yet, so let's hurry in and sign up. Blackie said anxiously after seeing Feng. Feng shook his head, seriously saying, Blackie, I'm not joining Shadow. I'll be opening my own workshop. Will you join me? Blackie was someone Feng met in another virtual reality game, and the former had pretty good skills. The two of them had faced many challenges together, and they were no different than true brothers at this point. During their time together working in Shadow, Blackie showed great talent in administration, even though he lacked the talent for gaming. He managed the 100,000 guild members clearly and orderly. If Feng had Blackie's help this time, his plans would be one step further. Yet, he would respect Blackie's decision regardless. It was because Feng had nothing right now, and Blackie's family circumstances were not that well, either. Blackie had only chosen to become a professional gamer and join Shadow to earn some credits for living expenses. Blackie blanked at Feng's words, lowering his head in silence. It was just too sudden. Not only that, the Feng that he saw today felt different. Unlike his usual impatient attitude, Feng currently gave off an unshakable and confident aura. After a full minute, Blackie raised his head to look at Feng. Brother Feng, stop speaking nonsense. Do you know how much a virtual gaming helmet costs? That's 8,000 credits. You also need at least 6 people to start up a workshop. What about the workplace, salary, everything else? Just the initial startup funds would require 70 to 80,000. There are also the follow-up investments. That's a lot of credits. Do you have that many credits right now? Blackie was very aware of Feng's circumstances. He knew Feng's household wasn't well off, so he wanted to persuade Feng away from this sort of crazy thinking Yuri right. Right now, I don't even have the credits for a God's Domain virtual gaming helmet. Feng nodded his head in admittance. It was like Blackie said. Even just 70 to 80,000 was considered a small amount. Feng recalled Lon Hailong had spent over 5 million credits for the 100-man workshop he had recruited. He had also spent more in the later stages to upgrade the workshop's quality and strength. Since this is so, rather than take the risk, wouldn't it be safer to join Shadow? At the very least, Shadow can provide us with virtual gaming helmets. Otherwise, forget becoming professional players. We wouldn't even be able to play the game. Seeing that Feng understood the core of the problem, Blackie sighed in relief as he pulled Feng into the teaching block. Feng shook away Blackie's hand, sternly staring at Blackie before saying in a grave tone, "I still plan on starting my own workshop. I don't want to be controlled by others. So, Blackie, will you join me?" Feng would not insist to Blackie since he did not have any guarantees. He also couldn't reveal the secret that he had been reincarnated. He could only hope that Blackie would believe in him. Seeing Feng's serious expression, Blackie felt Feng was acting weird today. This was madness. Everyone knew you couldn't earn money during the initial periods of virtual games. Did Feng have some way to make money in God's Domain? Even if they did make money, it would be after a few months. They did not have that much time to waste. After hesitating for quite some time, Blackie reluctantly answered, "I get it. You're the boss. I'll start a workshop together with you. But what about the virtual gaming helmets? We can't play the game without them, right?" Feng's tightened brows immediately relaxed as he happily clapped Blackie's shoulders, saying, "Now this is my good brother. Don't worry about the gaming helmets. I recall that God's Domain had a trial period available for university students. Every university has a distribution point, and as long as you show them your student identification, then, for 10 days, you can obtain a gaming helmet for free. Let's go and take a look. What do we do after 10 days? Blackie's tanned face turned ashen, suddenly feeling his future was pitch black. Why did he have to believe Feng? Could it be Feng's confidence and steadiness? There wouldn't be a problem venturing together with Feng, right? What could you do with 10 days in God's Domain? They would definitely miss out on the recruitment period of workshops after 10 days. In the end, they still had to buy the gaming helmet, but where would the money come from? Not even a professional gamer with a group will be able to earn 16,000 credits within 10 days of God's Domain's opening. Leave the money problem to me. Feng revealed a confident smile as he clapped Blackie's shoulders. Earning 16,000 credits in 10 days was indeed a pure fantasy. However, he had his spirit as a reincarnated person. No matter what the challenges were, he would break through them all, and the release of God's Domain was the starting point of his rise afterward. Feng brought Blackie to retrieve the virtual gaming helmets. He then used all his money to buy 2 large boxes of instant noodles, placing them under his desk in his rented house. They were enough to last him for over 10 days. After briefing Blackie on some things in God's Domain, Feng quietly waited for God's Domain's opening 25th of April, 9 p.m. Within the dark and silent room, a few glimmers of light flickered alive. Feng laid on his bed, gently pushing the start button as he closed his eyes. God's Domain, here I come. As expected, the flames gushing out from the rocket boots greatly increased after a moment. Shio! Arcus Maddox disappeared from the air, unable to be seen any more. Best not let us meet again. You can dream of escaping the next time, Blackie said in an unfortunate tone as he looked towards the spot where Arcus Maddox had disappeared in his heart. Feng felt that it was a pity to let the gnome go. However, it would no longer be dangerous when they grinded on wandering gnomes from now on. After this experience, the hazard gnome most likely would not show himself ever again. Let's go. Continue grinding on the wandering gnomes. Feng turned around and said to his party brother Feng, "You're still the best. How could I not think of it? If we killed all of this bastard's kinsmen, we'll see if he doesn't show up again." Blackie laughingly said. Feng was speechless. He turned around and left, no longer paying any attention to the fantasizing Blackie. Suddenly, Feng stopped his feet in shock. Damn. Our luck really is too poor. I never thought that Arcus Maddox would actually appear here. And he was also a level 5 hazard gnome. Feng tightly clenched his fists, his brows wrinkled. It was the first time he became so enraged. When everyone looked at Feng's wrathful expression, they could faintly feel the surroundings become chilly. They could not help but retreat a step, their foreheads covered in a cold sweat. Before, they felt Feng was a calm and easygoing person. Never would they have imagined Feng would become so terrifying after becoming angry. The forest around them no longer seemed lively, but more like a frozen hell, silent, cold, and dark. Brother Feng, are you all right? Blackie carefully asked. He was shocked. Feng was completely different from when he was mad or arguing with others. It was the first time Blackie saw Feng enraged to such a degree. "Oh, it's nothing." Feng reacted, replying with a smile. He stored back the dense killing intent into his heart. Such killing intent was slowly honed throughout the years Feng had played God's Domain. Compared to the Tyrant Bear Cola of 10 years in the future, there was nothing special about Feng's killing intent. However, at present, it was considered unbearable for Blackie and the other. Feng finally recalled the name of Arcus Maddox. Arcus Maddox was a famous Grandmaster engineer within God's Domain. 3 years after Arcus Maddox shocked the nation by creating the Sky Fortress, Twin Snake Ring, he had gone on to establish the Gnome Empire. With it, the new update, Emergence of the New World, also activated. At that time, countless super guilds started expeditions towards the fortress, Twin Snake Ring. However, all of them were annihilated, and Arcus Maddox was the cause of such a result. On the other hand, Feng was completely unaware of a great character had appeared right before his eyes. He also lost the chance to kill Arcus Maddox, so how could Feng not be enraged? Party leader, there's a box here. Did it drop from Arcus Maddox during the explosions? Gluttonous Mouse, who had been silent all this while, asked as he picked up a small metallic box from the grass. Feng received the box and took a look at it. He discovered the words Arcus Maddox carved onto the metallic box. Shortly after Feng opened the box, he said suddenly with a laugh, "Great. Good job, Mouse. With this, we didn't fight for nothing after all." When the group saw Feng in a happy mood, they knew the item must be very precious, as common items were nothing in Feng's eyes. As to wanting the item for themselves, none of them ever had such thoughts. They had long since made Feng their idol, and being able to aid their idol naturally made them happy. Let's do it this way. You guys stay here to grind and level up. I still have something that needs to be done. Notify me when you have all reached level 4. Feng kept the metallic box and hastily made the arrangements. Nobody could help him with the following matter. Only Feng was able to proceed. Everyone felt reluctant when they heard Feng's command. However, hearing Feng have plans for them after they reached level 4, their anticipation grew as they abided Feng's arrangements. Subsequently, Feng left the deeper regions of the Dark Moon Valley. The party had Blackie's AoE skill. Killing 7 or 8 gnomes at a time was no problem at all, and their leveling speed was at least 2 or 3 times faster than the other parties. On the other hand, what Feng needed to do was to utilize this metallic box and to forward the first step of his plans in God's Domain. Chapter 39, Philosopher's Stone. After leaving the Dark Moon Valley, Feng rushed towards Scarlet Lake. He had also activated gravity liberation to save more time. The players on their way to the Dark Moon Valley saw Feng speeding past them like a gale of wind. His speed was shockingly fast, and his figure was just a blur. Who is that person? Which assassin is he? His speed is so fast. No, look at his waist. That's a sword hanging there, not a dagger. He should be a swordsman. Crap. Are the current swordsmen that OP? The widely spread rumor on the forum stated that a mysterious swordsman killed the mayor of Redleaf Town. There is also a powerful swordsman at the Deathly Forest that received an invitation from a snow goddess. I would have played as a swordsman if I had known about this earlier. Say, do you think they're the same person? Definitely not. I saw the swordsman that killed the mayor. That male swordsman was as big as a black bear. His arms alone were thicker than our thighs. He had forcefully killed that level 15 mayor. The players passing by started a discussion as they watched Feng depart. They were inwardly speechless towards the swordsman job. They should have played as swordsmen if there was such a powerful job. However, it was too late now. Feng might have laughed it off if he had known their thoughts. There was no strongest job in God's domain. Only the strongest player Feng ran for over 2 hours through the vast plains. He activated gravity liberation over tens of times, escaping the pursuit of high-leveled monsters. He passed through the level 6 map, Wolfman's Ruins, and the level 8 map, Oro Fort, before arriving in the level 10 area. Scarlet Lake was the playground of level 10 water elementals and little fishmen. Watching from a high location, Feng could see groups of little fishmen patrolling. The closer it was to the Scarlet Lake, the more there were of little fishmen. The central region of the Scarlet Lake was the nest of the little fishmen, whereas annoying water elementals filled the water of the lake due to the densely packed and large number of monsters in the Scarlet Lake. The little fishman's curse skill was extremely horrendous. It could absorb a player's attributes and turn it into their own. The longer they fought, the stronger they would become. They were extremely hard to kill. Including the fact that there were no quests here, there were rarely any players who would willingly come here to level up. However, Feng had to enter into the deeper regions of the Scarlet Lake. The metal box dropped by Archismatics was extremely precious. If Archismatics were to know it fell into Feng's hands, he would most likely bleed out in rage. There was a treasure map inside the box, and the treasure it hid was located at Scarlet Lake. Feng had played God's Domain for over 10 years now. He had done extensive research regarding the history of God's Domain. He truly did not think Archismatics would have this treasure map. It was the record of a heaven-shaking secret 900 years ago. Alchemy Master Molotov had created an item with all his effort. Wars were waged between the large countries in God's Domain for this item. There were over 10 heroic figures that fought over it. However, this item became lost in the end, its whereabouts unknown. It had become an unsolved mystery in God's Domain. Meanwhile, the treasure map in Feng's hands, by chance, recorded the location of this item. This item was the Philosopher's Stone. It was a sacred item for alchemy. If alchemists could obtain the Philosopher's Stone, then they would have the ability to transform stone into gold, amassing immense wealth. They would even be able to revive the dead. Breaking the alchemy law of equivalent exchange, who would have thought such a sacred item would be placed in such an unremarkable location as Scarlet Lake. However, the Scarlet Lake was still a dangerous place for Feng. After all was said, there was still a gap of 8 levels between Feng and the monsters here. With the suppression due to levels, Feng was not an opponent for the level 10 monsters, not to mention the attribute-stealing little fishmen. However, Feng could not help but take the risk. The earlier he obtained the Philosopher's Stone, the earlier his heart could be at ease. If he waited until he was level 7 or 8, someone else might claim the item. He wouldn't even be able to feel regret. When that time came, Feng took out the metal box from his bag, carefully taking out the treasure map within it. He started researching it in detail. The marking on the treasure map was very clear. The treasure was located directly below the little fishman's nest. However, how would Feng be able to circle around all these little fishmen? The problem with the water elementals also needed to be solved. Although water elementals had low HP, they had a 60% immunity to physical attacks. They also had a movement speed reduction skill, so they were a headache for melee players. After observing for half an hour, Feng discovered that the little fishmen were not always on patrol. They would eventually take a break. Also, these little fishmen were only active by the lake's shores. They hardly ever entered the water, because once they entered it, their movement speed would sharply reduce by 60%. Feng could use this short rest period to rush into the lake, and once he was in it, the little fishmen would not be able to chase after Hemas for the water elementals under the water. Feng could use the doppelganger of Phantom Kill to lure them away. Then, he could swim to the cavern below the little fishman's nest. If Feng did not operate through his plan properly, he would definitely die. If he died, his losses would not be minor. It was not the experience loss that was a problem. However, with his advantage as a reincarnated person, Feng could quickly recuperate the experience he lost. Only, he would be sent back to the town after dying once, and the time he would waste by returning here was just too much. 10 more seconds. Feng watched the patrolling little fishmen, his heart estimating the time for him to sprint out time past second after second. A group of patrolling fishmen watched their surroundings. After discovering nothing out of the ordinary, they entered a small wooden hut by the lake to rest, emptying the land by the lake with all his might. Feng dashed towards the shore, and Feng was about 30 yards away from the lake. Another group of patrolling fishmen discovered Feng. They immediately sounded out an alarm, their hands wielding short swords as they rushed toward Feng when, faced with 4 level 10 little fishmen. As powerful as Feng was, he was not their match. Feng's only hope was to jump into the water. However, the little fishmen were very quick, taking only a short moment to catch up to Feng. They waved their short swords, slashing them at Feng's back. Feng knew he could not outrun the fishmen. He turned around and used Abyssal Bind on one of them, then continued by using Parry to block another one of his attackers. As a result, Feng stopped the other little fishmen from moving forward using the power behind the fishman's attack. Feng managed to pull away a distance of over 3 yards. He activated gravity liberation and then jumped onto the lake. However, the other little fishmen were quick to catch up, jumping into the lake after Feng, as well-plopped 4 little fishmen fell into the water. Feng, however, was madly running above the lake's surface. Walking on water was a skill that could only be activated after agility reached 80 points. However, Feng had the ring of gravity. As a result, his body had reached a state of near weightlessness after activating gravity liberation. Including his agility that was over 30 points, he, too, could move on the water's surface. His speed would not be reduced by the water in a few moments. Feng had shaken off the unyielding little fishmen. He ran to a location not far from the little fishman's nest. Diving into the water just after entering the water, Feng discovered a cavern that was surrounded by a lot of water elementals. The water elementals were encircling around the cavern, as if they were protecting something. Water elemental, common monster, level 10. HP 750/750. Feng used Phantom Kill. His doppelganger swam over, luring the water elementals just as Feng planned. A group of water elementals had discovered the doppelganger. One after another, they chased after the doppelganger. Meanwhile, the doppelganger swam upwards. Although the water elementals had high movement speed underwater, it was an entirely different story when they were above ground. They were the opposite of the little fishmen, becoming extremely slow once they reached the shore with the water elementals lured away by his doppelganger. Feng took the chance to quickly swim towards the cavern before Feng even reached the cavern. The system notified him of the death of his doppelganger. The doppelganger had only earned Feng over 20 seconds after killing the doppelganger. The water elementals discovered an intruder near the cavern. They all hurriedly swam back to the cavern entrance after discovering Feng. The speed of these water elementals increased by a fold as they sped toward Feng. Chapter 40, Sun Temple. Above the scarlet-colored lake, the speeding water elementals created waves of water that struck at the little fishman's nest. Waves that were as tall as a person enveloped the entire nest, destroying many of the small wooden huts on it. The hundreds of little fishmen inside the nest entered a frenzy. They screamed and bellowed, each of them holding weapons as they jumped into the water and swam towards the cavern below the nest dual layer protection. Feng took a look behind him, shocked as if hundreds of water elementals were not enough. Now there were also hundreds of little fishmen following behind. With this amount, even 2 or 3 elite groups of players would not amount to anything. Feng had no choice but to increase his speed and rush into the cave. There was still a thread of hope for survival, however. Feng's speed underwater was very slow. It was incomparable to the druids who had their seal transformation, where their movement speed was increased by 50% when moving underwater. Instead, Feng's movement speed was reduced by 50% soon. Feng was just 50 yards away from the cavern's entrance. However, the enraged water elementals approached Feng as if they were flying, their distance between Feng shortening quickly. 42 yards, 28 yards, 20 yards, 10 yards. Just when Feng was only 5 yards away from the cavern entrance, the water elementals had caught up with Feng. They waved their gigantic icy fists towards Feng's head. The attacks from water elementals carried a freezing effect that reduced movement speed. As long as they hit Feng, the water elementals would cling to him till death. Feng hurriedly spun around and used Parry, blocking the fist of the first water elemental. Using the water elemental's immense strength, Feng's body retreated backward by quite a distance. However, the remaining water elementals also rushed at him. It seems I'll be going back to town. Feng looked at the hundreds of water elementals in front of him. Feeling powerless just when Feng was about to give up, he had floated into the cavern. Inside, he saw a human-shaped ghost roaming about. It was roughly 30 yards away from Feng. Feng gave caution to the wind. If he had to die, then he would die trying. At the very least, he could obtain a little more information for future preparations. Hence, Feng used Windblade, his speed increasing by a large leap. Like a gale, Feng swept through the water and rushed to the shore of the cavern, escaping the clutches of the water elementals just in the nick of time. The moment the water elementals left the water, their speed was sharply reduced. They could not catch up to Feng's mad dash at all after leaving the water. Feng quickly rushed towards the human-shaped ghost. The moment the abyssal blade was about to slash across the ghost's neck, Feng suddenly discovered the half-transparent ghost did not actively attack him. Feng abruptly turned the tip of his sword away, the blade sliding past the ghost's side. It did not attract the ghost's hatred. Feng felt cold sweat down his back when he looked at the ghost's information. Brave one, Floyd. High Lord. Level 25. HP 360 000/360 000. If Feng had attacked this brave one and attracted his hatred, even if he had 100 lives, he would still end up dead within God's domain. Brave ones were only second to heroes regarding strength. Their position within a kingdom was even higher than that of a marquis, and was second only to a duke. Even if such a great character had died and turned into a ghost, he was still a monster of the Great Lord rank. He was a tyrant amongst monsters. Without 100-man group of elite players, it was impossible to kill off this ghost. Could he be the guardian of this place? Feng looked at the brave one, Floyd, silently guessing in his heart there were usually guards posted around places with treasure. As for the little fishmen and water elementals outside, they could be considered at most as guard dogs. They were unfit to guard an important treasure. Feng did not dare to stay any longer. After all, there was still a large group of monsters chasing after him. He hurriedly ran towards the inner regions of the cavern. The cavern was very large. There was a flight of stairs that led straight into the depths of the cavern, and following it down ought to lead Feng to the Philosopher's Stone. When Feng was right before the stairs, a sea of water elementals and little fishmen had rushed at him. It was as if they had an undying grudge against him. You lower life forms dare to sully this divine place? Prepare to receive divine punishment. Floyd's gaze suddenly erupted in rage, pulling out a dark golden greatsword from his back. The sword gave out a surge of evil that made it seem as if it were the master of the world when Floyd raised the great sword. The surrounding air started becoming heavy, following which Floyd gave out a loud bellow as his arms swung the great sword with all their might. A strong wind, followed by a sword flash, swept through all the water elementals and little fishmen. Each and every one of the monsters turned into ash, and the cavern's entrance instantly transformed into a pile of rubble strong. Feng exclaimed in shock. He had sorely underestimated the strength of a brave one. Floyd's single sword could easily wipe out a 100-man group of level 30 elite players. A 300-man group might be needed to even have a fighting chance. It was unexpected that the water elementals and little fishmen did not even have the right to become guard dogs. They were all annihilated in an instant. Feng wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. Luckily, he was a human and not a lower life form. Otherwise, his outcome would be similar to those water elementals and little fishmen. This place is truly vicious. I guess I can only go downward now. Feng looked at the collapsed entrance. Not even an earthworm could find a way through the debris. The stairs that led down were spiral-shaped. The rocky walls surrounding it were also enchanted with a kind of light-based magic, brightening the entire stairwell. However, this stairwell was extremely long. Fortunately, there were no dangers here. After walking for an entire half an hour, Feng finally arrived at the end of the stairwell, at the beginning of a wide and spacious hall. The hall was about the size of an entire football field, and it looked similar to a shrine of sorts, made out of gold and jade. The two sides of the hall were carved with an abundance of illustrations and texts. There was also an altar at the deepest part of the shrine. Above the altar was a treasure chest made of pure gold. On each side of the treasure chest, there were two statues made of gold, both of them holding a great sword in their hand system. Player has discovered the Sun Temple. It was the first time Feng had heard this name. In his previous life, there was no information on the Sun Temple. It might have been because no player had activated it before, so there was no information about it on the official website. However, looking at the situation, it should be very dangerous. However, Feng couldn't care less about it as he walked towards the golden altar. His target was the Philosopher's Stone, and the golden chest before his eyes should be holding the item. The moment Feng stepped onto the altar, he clearly felt a chill permeating his body. The chilliness came from the two gigantic golden statues. Feng did not know what sort of consequences there would be if he continued onwards to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone. However, he no longer had any choice. The cavern's entrance had already been sealed off, so he could only decide after grabbing the Philosopher's Stone. Feng slowly opened the golden treasure chest. Golden rays of light leaked out from the chest, illuminating the entire temple. Subsequently, the golden rays started to fade, revealing 3 items inside the chest. Feng pocketed the items with zero hesitation. Crap. How could the Philosopher's Stone end up in such a state? Feng looked at the thumb-sized, blood-red stone, feeling extremely disappointed. Philosopher's Stone damaged. Epic rank special item, dropped after death. A sacred item for alchemy. The Philosopher's Stone can be used to turn stone into gold, revive the dead, and has many more unfathomable uses. However, the Philosopher's Stone was damaged and broken into 5 pieces by the Sword Emperor Knight. Nevertheless, the Philosopher's Stone possesses immense strength. As long as the 5 pieces are gathered, it will be able to recover all of its strength active effect. Due to being damaged, the Philosopher's Stone possesses less than 1/10 of its original strength. It is only possible to use it for alchemy conversion and elemental refinement. Although the effects were greatly reduced, Feng was still satisfied with it. These 2 abilities would enable Feng to accomplish a lotus for the remaining 2 items. One of them was the Golden Greatsword, a level 10 fine gold weapon. The other item was an instantaneous movement magic scroll, a great treasure indeed. Feng looked at the golden greatsword in his hands with extreme excitement. Aside from magic weapons, it was the best item a level 10 player could have. If a level 10 player were to equip this greatsword, They could definitely become invincible amongst players of the same level. At this moment, the two statues by the side shook. Their eyes released a red glow, locking their sights on Feng. Feng used the instantaneous movement magic scroll without hesitation. Golden-colored magical seals suddenly wrapped around Feng. The spell on the magic scroll had a cast time of 3 seconds, and it was capable of sending the player to a selected location. This magic scroll was extremely precious, although there were only a few copies of it in the entire God's domain. Dying in this place was a much greater loss to Feng. Just as Feng was about to be slashed by the golden statues, he vanished from the temple. Chapter 41, Commotion in Town. Red Leaf Town, Fountain Plaza. The entire plaza was dyed crimson by the setting sun. There were quite a lot of lifestyle players setting up food stalls and selling snacks that were unique to God's domain. These snacks tasted delicious, and they were much better than the delicacies in real life. Also, their selling price was just 2 or 3 coppers. It was truly a bargain. Many players would come here to rest and taste the delicacies of God's domain after a day's worth of hard-fought battles. After all, they could only earn tens of coppers in a single day, and after deducting the expended costs, they would only be left with slightly over 10 coppers. So, giving them a treat should not be a problem. There were quite a few couples sitting on the stone benches, chatting. They ate the food they bought as they enjoyed a lovely time. Suddenly, every player in Red Leaf Town received a system announcement system. A player has triggered a special storyline. Insurrection of the Little Fishmen has been activated. An expedition quest has been activated in Red Leaf Town. Players can now receive the expedition quest from the Adventurers Guild. Completing the expedition quest will reward players with bountiful rewards and guild reputation. All the players were shocked. In Red Leaf Town, a place where quests were extremely rare, there was actually an expedition quest. Moreover, the rewards were great. It was truly unimaginable who was the awesome person that actually triggered a special storyline. The player who achieved this feat attracted the attention of every player in Red Leaf Town. Everyone wondered what great rewards this player gained for activating the storyline. After all, activating a storyline was definitely a rare occurrence. So, how could the rewards be few? Quite a lot of players started having their own wicked thoughts. They wanted to kill off the player who activated the storyline quest. Unfortunately, the system announcement did not reveal the player's name. Compared to the average players, the various large guilds were in a state of turmoil. At this stage of the game, aside from clearing dungeons, there was not a single quest that was capable of increasing guild reputation. Guild required guild reputation to level up. As long as their guild could reach level 2 a step earlier, they would be able to obtain the corresponding guild benefits, creating a large advantage over the other guilds currently. The other towns surrounding Scarlet River also received the same system announcement. It wasn't just Red Leaf Town. All of the large guilds began strategizing a plan for their crusade against the Little Fishmen. Meanwhile, Feng, who was the cause of all this commotion, currently sat inside the auction house. The auction house was a very convenient place. The items placed on auction by players were not just limited to Red Leaf Town. They could be seen and bought in the hundreds of towns and small cities under the influence of White River City. However, the auction house was very cunning. They charged a 5% handling fee for all items auctioned, so the items there are usually very expensive. However, the auction house was unquestionably the best place for players to sell certain items anonymously. Also, it had been quite some time since God's domain started. The players had already amassed quite an amount of coins, and the large guilds should have already piled up a lot of funding. If Feng were to set up a stall in Red Leaf Town, not only would he attract attention, he might also be targeted by people like Flaming Tiger. More importantly, the reason Feng chose the auction house was that there were too few players in Red Leaf Town who could afford the items he planned to sell. However, it was a different story if there were hundreds of towns competing for them. Hence, Feng placed a mysterious iron plate armor on the auction house, setting its base price at 25 silver coins. Then he placed 5 pieces of bronze equipment, with the base price of the plate armor at 3 silver coins, and the others at 2 silver coins. As for the level 10 fine gold greatsword, the result of placing on auction would be too terrifying to imagine. This weapon was worth at least 2 gold coins, which was the equivalent of 200 silver coins. Currently, even 1 silver coin was extremely precious, so who would be able to even afford the weapon? Following which, Feng searched his bag via the half-transparent screen. Initially, players were gifted with a bag that had 100 slots. However, it was far from enough for Feng. Every player could equip a maximum of 7 bags. So, Feng immediately bought 6 of the largest bags currently available. Each of the bags had 25 slots, and each sold for 40 copper coins. 6 bags meant 240 copper coins. Such an amount was definitely unaffordable to normal players, but it was just a small sum to Feng's storage space increased by a lot after equipping the 6 bags. Afterward, Feng left the auction house and set up a stall not far from it. He was not the least bit interested with the storyline quest. He would not fight over the rewards with the others. He already had his fill, so it was only proper for the others to have the leftovers buying magic essences and stones in bulk. A stack 2 of magic essences for 6 coppers. A stack of stones for 10 coppers. Feng loudly shouted at this stage of the game. Magic essences were some of the materials needed to practice enchanting, whereas stones were one of the building materials engineers needed. However, many level 0 to level 3 monsters would drop these materials when killed, so they were barely worth anything. The materials the mini guilds obtained were also sufficient to supply their own lifestyle players, so they would never buy any of them. As for normal players, they would only occasionally buy these materials. However, there was still an ocean of players that did not know how to deal with these materials. They would usually sell these materials to NPCs at a low price. A stack of 20 bottles of magic essence sold for 5 coppers, and a stack of 100 stones sold for 9 coppers. Feng bought them at a price of 1 copper coin higher, so there were quite a lot of players who were willing to sell their materials to him. An extra copper per stack would still be quite a significant income. Magic essence was one of the required materials to make the garrison armor. Besides that, large amounts of copper, ore, and bronze were also needed. These ores were scarcely available, and all the large guilds bought them in bulk. Unfortunately, it was very difficult to get a hold of them. Feng also originally planned to grind for ore. However, now that he had the Philosopher's Stone, ore was no longer a problem. The Philosopher's Stone could carry out elemental refinement. That meant it could refine stone. There was a great chance to obtain, or even rare, ore. There was absolutely no need for Feng to personally grind for them. He could just buy them at an extremely low price. Because of this, tens of thousands of players had effectively become Feng's laborers very quickly. A large crowd of players had gathered in front of Feng. Big brother, I have 6 stacks of magic essence here. Will you take them? I have 3 stacks of stone. Do you want them? Many players started asking Feng, worried that his bag would fill. After all, they just had too many magic essences and stones. There were no players who were willing to buy these materials. However, it was also a shame to just sell them to the NPCs, so the materials just stayed inside their bags. I'll take all of them. Just trade them over. Feng said before this. Feng amassed quite a bit of wealth. Including his transaction with Gentle Snow, he was in possession of quite a lot of coins. Feng could definitely buy large amounts of magic essences and stones. The player was selling 3 stacks of magic essences here. A player was selling 5 stacks of stones there. Within moments, Feng had acquired 60 stacks of magic essences and 85 stacks of stones. The money that remained in his pockets was less than 10 coppers now. Sorry, but I'm full. Feng packed up his stall after explaining suddenly. The many remaining players who came to sell off their magic essences and stones had faces filled with disappointment. Big brother, will you still buy them in the future? A player asked. I will. However, it will still be a period before I do buy them. You all can save them up for now. Feng resolutely said. The amount of magic essences and stones Feng just purchased was far from enough for him to become an advanced forging apprentice 3 after leaving the business street. Feng arrived at the Forging Association. He paid 5 coppers to rent a basic forging room for 1 hour inside the basic forging room. All the equipment needed for forging was provided. Players did not need to buy their own equipment. The intermediate rank forging room was a lot better. It could increase the success rate of forging by 3%. However, it costs 1 silver per hour to use that room. As for advanced forging rooms, those were not available in small towns. They were only available in cities. However, their prices were extremely staggering. Chapter 42, Elemental Refinement. Forging Association. Inside a forging room, Feng took out a stack of stone. Placing it on the table, a stack of stone had 100 pieces in total. They immediately filled up the round table. Some even fell to the ground. Time to see how good you actually are. Feng smiled as he retrieved the crimson-red Philosopher's Stone. If the Philosopher's Stone were seen by someone else, the consequences Feng would face would be immense. Hence, Feng rented a forging room. Without his permission, nobody could enter the room. Feng took a piece of stone from the table and used the Philosopher's Stone on its system. Do you wish to use the Philosopher's Stone for elemental refinement? Feng immediately chose yes, following which the Philosopher's Stone started emitting a faint red glow. A mysterious power flowed into the stone puff. The stone the size of a fist suddenly turned into yellow sand, scattering to the ground. The result was a failure, however. Feng revealed a calm smile at the result. It did not perturb him in the slightest. Afterward, he picked up another stone and tried again, or was very precious. A normal copper or sold for 2 coppers. They were only worth 1 copper coin if sold to an NPC. A stack of 100 copper or could be sold for 200 copper coins to guilds, and they would still fight over them. Compared to a stack of stone, which only sold for 10 copper coins. Copper or was just too expensive. Elemental refinement extracted the metal element out of the stone. However, some stones did not possess any metal element, so it was only natural that they turn to sand. Such failures were just too common. Pung. There was still no, or after 10 consecutive tries, Feng started becoming depressed. The success rate was just too low. Feng even started to suspect that these stones were picked from a desert to result in all the yellow sand. Relax. There are still many stones left. Feng sucked in a deep breath. Reassuring himself, he picked up another piece of stone, trying elemental refinement once more. This time, the stone still scattered into a pile of sand. However, in the middle of the yellow grains, there was a piece of metal that had a purplish-red luster. It was copper ore. With the first piece of copper ore in his hands, Feng let out a relaxed breath. His hands started moving at a faster pace. All the stones above the stone table turned into yellow sand within moments. The stack of stones had yielded a total of 23 pieces of copper ore and 2 pieces of bronze ore. Compared to copper ore, the price of bronze ore was 3 times that of copper ore. They were worth 3 copper coins when sold to NPCs. Due to the rarity of bronze ore, players would buy them at 7 copper coins a piece. Seeing the ores on the table, Feng felt the Philosopher's Stone was truly a gold mine. Even if the Philosopher's Stone was currently damaged, it was still out of the ordinary. It was no wonder why many kingdoms were willing to muster up their armies and fight for the Philosopher's Stone. Having the Philosopher's Stone in hand was the equivalent of having a wealthy treasury. At that time, a kingdom would find it hard not to become prosperous. Feng kept the ores on the table and brought out another stack of stone. Stack after stack of stones disappeared, whereas the amount of yellow sand had piled up into a small hill. Fortunately, the forging room could be cleaned of rubbish with just a click of a button. After pushing the clean button, the small hill of yellow sand vanished from sight after spending an hour's time. Feng had refined 40 stacks of stones. He had obtained a little over 7 stacks of copper ore and a little over 1 stack of bronze ore. They would be worth over 20 silver coins if Feng sold them. Meanwhile, the cost of obtaining these ores were only 4 silver coins. The difference was 5 times the price. It was an absolute profit. Most importantly, ores dropped in very small numbers, so it was impossible to buy them in bulk. Feng received a system notification the moment he had left the forging room system. The violent bear armor you placed at the auction house has been sold. After deducting the procedural fees, 31 silvers, 53 coppers have been placed in your bag. System: the dark star boots you placed at the auction house has been sold. After deducting the procedural fees, 3 silvers, 21 coppers have been placed in your bag. A series of notifications from the auction house had caused Feng's lips into a smile as expected. The greater the competition, the higher the price would go. Feng was very satisfied with the amount the item sold for. He never imagined that a mysterious iron plate armor for shield warriors could actually be sold for over 30 silver coins. It seems there were a lot of wealthy people within the area of influence of White River City after selling the equipment. Feng had suddenly become a wealthy tycoon. With over 50 silver coins in his pockets, even his confidence was different now. Currently, players would still be happy over having 20 to 30 copper coins on their person. Feng already possessed more than 50 silver coins, including the silver coins General Snow owed him. If Feng were to sell off the copper or he had immediately, he would instantly become wealthy with gold. However, he would not sell the ores. These ores were the foundation for Feng to earn big money following, which Feng rented the forging room for another hour. He turned the remaining stones into ores. His luck was better this time around. From 45 stacks of stones, he obtained 10 stacks of copper ore and 2 stacks of bronze ore. With this, Feng had a total of 17 stacks of copper ore and 3 stacks of bronze ore. It would be quite some time before Feng could use them all up with money in hand now. Feng once more arrived at the central area of the Forging Association, at the administration area. Currently, there were quite a few forger players that were groomed by guilds, renting forging rooms. This is just evil. It actually costs 5 coppers for an hour. My guild just gave me 30 coppers. That's not enough at all. That's considered good already. At least the equipment is all there. Look at the forging equipment. Even the most common required a few silvers. An entire set would cost over 30 silver coins. It's just a blatant ripoff. You still haven't seen the intermediate forging room. It costs 1 silver an hour, but the room only increases your success rate by 3%. Even a first-rate guild would not be able to handle such a price. A few forgers continuously complained. They bitterly detested the prices set by the Forging Association. However, there was also a hint of bragging carried in their voices. After all, they had the support of their guilds, whereas normal players wouldn't even be able to rent a forging room. Not to mention increasing their forging level. Feng circled these players, walking towards the manager of the association, saying, "I want to rent an intermediate forging room. May I know how long you wish to rent it for?" The Ashen youth, who was the association's manager, excitedly asked. Currently, a majority of the adventurers were poor blokes. Every one of them only rented the basic forging rooms, and even then, they rented with unwillingness. So, a great change occurred to the manager's servicing attitude when he was able to see a rich adventurer like Feng looking at the time. It was currently morning in the real world. When using the virtual gaming helmet, a person could not stay within God's domain for too long. 2 hours then. Feng said after some thought, "All right, here is your key. That will be a total of 2 silver coins." The manager handed the key over to Feng. Smiling, Feng took out 2 shiny silver coins, placing them on the table and turning around to leave. The players who had previously been discussing the deviousness of the Forging Association were all dumbstruck. They even thought they were hallucinating. However, they were indeed silver coins on the table, and not the scarlet yellow copper coins crap. A tycoon, a male elementalist, said in envy. "Brother tycoon, little sister knows how to warm beds." Another pretty and flirtatious female player winked at Feng, flattering him. "Isn't it just some dirty money? I will definitely become an intermediate forging apprentice a step ahead of him," a male priest said in a sour tone, even though he knew it to be impossible. The facilities of the intermediate forging room were much better than the basic one. On the surface, the room itself only increased the success rate of forging by 3%. However, including the facilities that came with the room, the success rate was increased by at least 5% to a forger. A difference of 5% success rate was like the difference between heaven and earth. Chapter 43, Book of Forging. Feng took the key to the intermediate forging room and went up the 2nd floor. Ignoring the flirting young lady, the 1st floor of the Forging Association only had basic forging rooms, whereas intermediate forging rooms were located on the 2nd floor. When, compared to the 1st floor, there were far fewer people on the 2nd floor. There were only NPCs walking around. Players would not come to this place at all. Also, there were only 20 intermediate forging rooms, unlike the basic rooms, which numbered at 50. Feng entered the intermediate forging room. The room was much larger and refined. The facilities available were also better than the basic room, especially the hammer and flame. These two items were not simple at all. Feng held up the silvery white hammer that was placed on the iron-woven felt 100 refinement hammer, bronze rank. Forging items. When forging, the success rate is increased by 3% requirements, strength 4. Just this 100 refinement hammer alone was hard to obtain by players. The best hammers NPCs sold were common hammers. Those hammers did not increase the success rate of forging. As for stealing this 100 refinement hammer, it was an impossible task. Items that belonged to the forging room could not be taken away by players. The flame here was extraordinary as well. Instead of the usual scarlet, yellow color, the flame here burned with a scarlet, green color. It was not a common flame, but a mysterious flame. Feng took a look at its description: Scarlet Devil Flame. Tier 1 Mysterious Flame. Special item. Possesses extremely high temperatures. Items smelted with the flame will have higher purity. When refining potions or forging items, there will be a definite increase in success rates. Mysterious flames were rare and powerful flames. These flames had varying strength, and they could be categorized into 9 tiers. The first tier was the weakest, whereas the 9th tier was the strongest. However, even a first-tier mysterious flame was not something that could be easily obtained by players due to the mysterious flame's rarity. Its price within God's domain was extremely high, including the fact that both potion-making and forging required mysterious flames. The prices of mysterious flames had become even more shocking. There was once a Tier 4 flame that caused tens of first-rate guilds to fight over it. After the death of millions of players, the flame finally ended up in the hands of the world dominators. Not long after, a master potion maker in world dominators rose to become a grandmaster potion maker, increasing the influence of the world dominators by a large leap. Feng had a great yearning within him when he looked at the burning mysterious flame. It was the thirst of a forger. Just when Feng was in deep thought, he suddenly recalled a matter. On the second month of God's domain's operation, the third-rate guild, Glorious Light, had discovered a Tier 2 mysterious flame, Ice Blue Devil Flame. The flame was found in the 100 Ghosts Forest, and its discovery induced great envy into the other guilds. At that time, there were a lot of lifestyle players who had applied to join Glorious Light, allowing the guild's power to abruptly increase and becoming the tyrant of a small city. However, there were also many guilds who gathered information in secret, wanting to obtain a mysterious flame for themselves. Naturally, Shadow was no exception to this. Shadow had discovered the location and method of obtainment of the mysterious flame from Glorious Light's inner circle. Unfortunately, such mysterious flames only appeared once, never appearing again after they were gone. This discovery caused many guilds to waste their efforts. As he was thinking about the Ice Blue Devil Flame, Feng suddenly started having intentions towards this mysterious flame. If he could make it his own, it would definitely be of great help to him in the future when he started his own guild. Moreover, the flame would be of great help in pushing Feng to become a true forger. However, Feng still needed to hash out a proper plan to obtain the Ice Blue Devil Flame. He needed to prepare many things before he could obtain the flame, following which Feng took out the garrison armor's forging design. Without wasting time, he immediately chose to learn it. System. You have learned how to forge the garrison armor. Afterward, Feng placed all the needed materials onto the stone table. Then he took out the immensely precious book of forging and started to forge. Feng was a basic forging apprentice. His success rate for forging a level 0 common equipment did not exceed 20%, and after a successful forging, there was a 40% chance for him to obtain 1 proficiency point. If Feng were to forge the garrison armor, a level 3 bronze equipment, his chance of success would not exceed 5%. Successfully forging a piece of bronze equipment would bring an additional bonus, which was a 100% chance to obtain 2 proficiency points. However, 1,000 proficiency points were needed to become an intermediate forging apprentice. Obtaining such a large amount of points required equally large funding to support it. There was no way for a lifestyle player to support such a large sum of money by themselves. The forgers and guilds all started out by forging common equipment. There was not a single guild who would allow these lifestyle players to forge bronze equipment right off the bat. To begin with, they didn't even possess a forging design for bronze equipment, and even if they did, they wouldn't carry out such an action. The success rate of a basic forging apprentice was just too low, and the materials needed were just too expensive. A single failure would cost 1 silver coin or more. It was a loss that not even guilds could handle. Moreover, they couldn't even collect that many materials to make the equipment. However, Feng did not have such worries. He had the Philosopher's Stone, so he did not lack in resources. Furthermore, the materials needed to make the garrison armor were cheaply priced. It only required 5 bottles of magic essences, 5 pieces of bronze ore, and 20 pieces of copper Oregon. The cost of making the garrison armor was only 80 copper coins. When compared to the cost of making other bronze equipment, it was at least 20 coppers cheaper. The garrison armor also had very good attributes, so it was extremely welcomed. Feng wouldn't have to be troubled over figuring out how to sell it. The most important thing was the Book of Forging. The Book of Forging could increase the success rate of forging common equipment by 70%, bronze equipment by 50%, mysterious iron equipment by 30%, secret silver equipment by 20%, fine gold equipment by 10%, dark gold equipment by 5%, and epic equipment by 1% with such attributes. The Book of Forging could allow a player to become a master forger easily and unimpeded basic forging. Apprentices originally had a 20% success rate at forging common equipment. Including the 70% from the book, the success rate would become 90%. Further, including the facilities of the intermediate forging room and removing the possibilities of mistakes, the success rate of making common equipment was 99% or higher. Unless the player was a pig too, failure was impossible. The Book of Forging's frightening abilities could clearly be seen from theses for the garrison armor. Feng had a 5% success rate for making it. Including the 50% from the book, the 3% from the room's facilities, and also the effects of the mysterious flame, Feng now had a 60% success rate for making the garrison armor. Not to mention bronze equipment. Even if common equipment had a 60% success rate, it would still drive forger players mad. Such a high percentage for success was something unimaginable to forgers, following which Feng started slowly making the garrison armor according to the forging design's requirements. He first smelted the copper and bronze ore in the fire. After being in the fire for 5 minutes, the ore started to melt and form a lump. Afterward, Feng added in the magic essence, letting it burn for another minute before removing the red-hot ore and placing it onto the metal felt. The ore's scorching hot temperature caused Feng to sweat. However, Feng did not dare be careless. As the following process was the most important part after finishing the preparations, Feng held the 100 refinement hammer and readied it to hammer the fiery or dang. Dang! Dang! Sparks flew in all directions. The hammering sounds echoed throughout the wide forging room. Feng struck every hit with careful precision. In his previous life, Feng did not learn forging. He only learned the gathering skill. However, he still knew quite a lot about forging. After all, he had conversed with a master forger quite often, so he was knowledgeable to the degree of not making certain low-level mistakes. After hammering the ore over 100 times, Feng felt that it was perfect. Feng wiped away the sweat on his forehead, carefully selecting the crimson ore's interface and clicking the complete button, following which the red-hot ore started transforming. Within 5 seconds, it had transformed into a silvery gray colored armor. On the surface, there seemed to be nothing wrong with it. However, equipment's successful forging did not just depend on its appearances. There was also its quality. Quality included the equipment's attributes, and rank bronze equipment that was badly forged would have their ranks decreased to common, or their base attributes would not be up to standards. Hence, Feng selected the information of the armor, checking whether it was a success or a failure. Chapter 44, Change. Although Feng could handle failure, There was nobody who was willing to squander their money for no good reason. So, Feng was, more or less, slightly nervous after Feng selected the option to check the armor's information. 3 words appeared on the panel. Identification in progress. The red loading bar slowly increased. The system was currently determining the statistics of the equipment after 3 seconds had passed. The system finished identifying the armor and revealed the armor's information: Garrison armor, bronze rank plate armor. Level 3. Equipment requirement: Strength 10. Defense plus 22. Strength plus 2. Endurance plus 2. HP plus 150. Durability 35/35. Additional ability: Defensive power. Reduces damage taken by 3%, restricted to Shield Warriors and Guardian Knight system. Garrison armor has been successfully forged. Forging proficiency increased by 2 points. Obtained 800 EXP. Great. It even has an additional ability: Defensive power. Feng was extremely happy when he saw the additional ability on the Garrison armor. He never imagined his first try at forging a piece of bronze equipment would be a success. He even obtained so much EXP. It was no wonder why the master forgers in his previous life never went out to grind, but their levels were not a bit low. Not only had the Garrison armor forged met the standard attribute values, but it also possessed an additional ability. Originally, the Garrison armor did not possess defensive power. However, when the forger exhibited extraordinary skill, coupled with the presence of the mysterious flame, there was a chance for an additional ability to appear on the equipment. In such occurrences, the price of the equipment would be increased to another level. Feng took his time sizing up the Garrison armor, feeling the texture of the silvery gray metal and admiring its eye-catching design. The average piece of bronze equipment was absolutely no match for it. Feng was very satisfied with his creation. Currently, common equipment was still the mainstream equipment for players. Even if players were to reach level 6 in the future, it would not be a surprise to find them wearing only common equipment. After all, it was too hard to obtain bronze equipment. As for the elite parties, just having 1 to 2 pieces of bronze equipment was considered being blessed. The Garrison armor could be used by both Shield Warriors and Guardian Knights. If Feng were to sell the armor, the elite parties would definitely welcome it. After all, the quality of an MT's equipment could ease the difficulty of conquering a dungeon a lot. Even if Feng were to set the price at 4 silver coins, these parties would still buy the armor. Regardless the cost is for the defensive power of the Garrison armor, its benefits toward the party's MT went without saying. Feng would not accept anything lower than 5 silver coins for this armor. With his first experience at successful forging, Feng continued forging Garrison armors. However, Feng took out the 100 refinement steel this time. He wanted to know what effects the steel would have when it was used to forge equipment within 10 minutes. The second Garrison armor took form. However, the color on this Garrison armor was different than the previous one. Instead of having a silvery gray color, it was pitch black. Now, after going through 3 seconds of identification, the system displayed the statistics to Feng: Garrison heavy armor, bronze rank plate armor. Level 3. Equipment requirement: Strength 14. Defense plus 25. Strength plus 2. Endurance plus 4. HP plus 150. Durability 40/40. Additional ability: Defensive power. Reduces damage taken by 5%, restricted to Shield Warriors and Guardian Knight system. Garrison heavy armor has been successfully forged. Forging proficiency increased by 2 points. Obtained 1000 EXP system. Due to your forging genius, forging proficiency has been increased by an additional 2 points. Currently, Feng had completely forgotten about the additional proficiency points that his forging talent gave him. Instead, his eyes were fixated on the Garrison heavy armor. The attributes on the armor were already comparable to a piece of level 3 mysterious iron equipment. The price tag on it was at least 10 silver coins. Feng never imagined that the 100 refinement steel would create such large changes. Feng had no choice but to admit that the item given by a master forger was not ordinary. Unfortunately, Feng only had 9 pieces of 100 refinement steel remaining naturally. Now that Feng knew the effects of the 100 refinement steel, he would not simply squander them away. He would set them aside and use them when he had good equipment to forge 2 hours quickly passed by. Feng forged garrison armors without stopping during this time. He had obtained a total of 23 pieces of garrison armor, but he also failed to forge for pieces. Feng was very satisfied with the result. A single, successfully forged garrison armor could easily remedy the loss of the 4 failures at the same time. Feng himself had also risen to level 3. His current level was not that far from the expert players. Moreover, his forging proficiency had increased to 44 points. Such an increase was at least 4 to 5 times faster than those forgers that belonged to guilds following which. Feng left the intermediate forging room and arrived in front of the auction house, immediately auctioned off the 11 pieces of garrison armor that did not possess defensive power. Their base price is set at 4 silver coins. As for the garrison armors and garrison heavy armor that possessed defensive power, Feng placed them aside for now. He wanted to let these guilds and elite parties have a taste of the armor first. That way, the remaining garrison armors could be sold at an even better price afterward. Feng set up a stall in the trade area, casually yelling out. Following which, many players ran over to Feng, selling their stones and magic essences to him. After purchasing the materials for half an hour, Feng took a look at the time. It was near nightfall in God's domain. The monsters at night became much more powerful, and killing them became much more difficult. This period was not suited for leveling, and Feng should rest as well currently. He was still using the virtual gaming helmet, not the virtual gaming pod, to play God's domain. The virtual gaming pod could provide the energy and nutrients required by the player's body at any time. It could also stimulate the body's muscles, preventing the body from weakening due to playing God's domain for long periods. Feng's finger tapped and clicked, calling out the system interface, and choosing to log off currently. Within the cramped rented apartment, the sunlight had long since seeped through the windows and scattered throughout the room. The temperature within the room was also starting to rise. Feng took off the gaming helmet. He lifted up his body and stretched after more than 10 hours of inactivity and lying on the bed. Feng's body was numbed throughout. He needed to move around before he could return to normal. Feng started doing push-ups, sit-ups, and other forms of basic training in this extremely materialistic age. Body training had already become indispensable in one's life after tens of years of constant research. Scientists have managed to obtain a huge breakthrough in strengthening the human body and prolonging its lifespan. Mankind could now retain their youth for a longer period. The breakthrough also increased the average lifespan of a person to 100 years old. At the same time, scientists had pointed out the necessity of working out the body henceforth. The age of exercise had arrived in current times. Sports tournaments and fighting competitions were the attention of the public. Just in the university alone, there were already plenty of sports societies and martial arts societies, and they were very welcomed by the students in the current society. Those who did not possess a trick up their sleeves would be looked down upon. On the other hand, those celebrity athletes and martial arts experts were absolutely revered. In the university, there was never a lack of beautiful women surrounding the distinguished athletes and students who often participated in mixed martial arts competitions. As for pretty boys, their time has long since faded from popularity in his previous life. Feng did not pay much attention to his body. As a result, he nearly caused its destruction. By the time he wanted to train his body, he was no longer young. Even if he had trained with all his might, the effects would not be great in this life. Feng would not be the same as before, naturally. He would not solely pay attention to God's domain. Ignoring his body's training after training for half an hour, Feng's entire body was covered with sweat. It looked as if he had just taken a shower. Just when he was about to dine on his cooked instant noodles, his phone started ringing. Feng looked at the contacting person. Unexpectedly, it was the usually silent female class monitor. Zhao, Ruashi class monitor, what's up? Feng asked after answering the call. According to Feng memories, aside from attending classes, Feng never had any contact with the female class monitor. Within the 4 years Feng had spent in the university, he had not spoken over 100 sentences with Zhao Ruashi. Feng, hurry over to school. I failed to notify you of this because you do not live in the male dormitories, but now I'm telling you. At 11 o'clock, there will be an important matter being announced at Teaching Block 3, Classroom 401. Feng looked towards the electronic clock on his table. It was already 10:30 right now. He answered, "All right, I'll go there immediately."